Red flags now for the malaria drug President Trump has repeatedly touted to treat the coronavirus. A new study linking that drug, hydroxychloroquine, to a higher death rate among patients. The drug has been approved for coronavirus in limited cases. Medical professionals have repeatedly urged caution, saying let's wait for more studies, more data. But the president and his allies at Fox News aren't known for patience or for caution.
The FDA also gave emergency authorization for hydroxychloroquine. We're having some very good things happening with it. It's shown very encouraging, very encouraging early results.
This drug that you and I have talked about, hydroxychloroquine, talked about it with Dr. Grace, is already being used. And one patient was described as Lazarus, getting up after he was like on death's door, and they started getting a protocol of hydroxychloroquine at Lenox Hill, and it's suddenly like Lazarus up from the grave. I mean, that's an actual case.
Watching people in the media talk down a potentially life-saving medicine because a politician they don't like has endorsed it is probably the most shameful thing I, as someone who's done this for 29 years, have ever seen.
Hydroxychloroquine is a very safe drug. It has been given to tens of millions of individuals in the world since its approval.
We have purchased and we have stockpiled 29 million pills of the hydroxychloroquine, 29 million. A lot of drugstores have them by prescription, and also, and they're not expensive. We're sending them to various labs, our military, we're sending them to the hospitals, we're sending them all over.
In their protocols, doctors have protocols for doing certain things. They don't even mention complications from hydroxychloroquine because they're so uncommon.
On their webpage, the FDA is offering generic guidance to manufacturers on how to produce hydroxychloroquine.
So the hydroxychloroquine is something that I have been pushing very hard. I got the very early approval from the FDA.
If things don't go as planned, it's not going to kill anybody. It will be wonderful. It'll be so beautiful. It'll be a gift from heaven if it works. If some other person put it forward, they'd say, oh, let's go with it. You know, what do you have to lose?
There's a lot of stuff floating around about the hydroxychloroquine.
Very good.
And the media seems to be almost rooting for it not to work.
Things are happening. I haven't seen bad. I've not seen bad. And one thing that we do see is that people are not going to die from it. So if somebody's in trouble, you take it, I think.
And it's being used worldwide. Yeah, and it's being used worldwide.
This study done by a reputable center, double-blind, randomized trial, showed that there was an improvement in outcomes in patients who took the hydroxychloroquine. It's not a panacea, but you have to respect data.
In my open, I put in a sound of the woman who was a Democrat from Detroit, a Michigan representative, who said, you know, thank God for Donald Trump even mentioning this. Once I got on the hydroxy, I was fine.
Well, your open was spot on.
Is there something else
it's politicized. No, it's just, come on, it's like the never Trumpers. It's like, oh, if he's for it, we got to be against it.
I've seen things that I sort of like. So what do I know? I'm not a doctor. But I have common sense.
Joining me now to discuss, CNN Chief Media Correspondent Brian Stelter and cardiologist Dr. Jonathan Reiner. Doctor, I want to start with you and about this study. Now, this is one study, and if my understanding is right, it has not been peer-reviewed. But if nothing else, it should tell us we should not try to play doctor on TV, whether we're the President of the United States or we work at another network, that we should wait and study data. What is your takeaway from what you've seen?
Well, the problem is that we don't have randomized clinical trial data. This country has a long history of approving drugs only when the data that comes from trials which are designed in very careful ways to provide reliable information show that there is substantial evidence of both safety and efficacy. And we don't have it for this drug. Look, I desperately want this drug to work. It would be fabulous. And the president obviously is interested in a quick fix here, but medicine doesn't lend itself to quick fixes. We rely on data, and data where we randomize people to either receive a placebo or the active drug, and we don't have that. The VA study is a small study. it does suggest harm in one of the hydroxychloroquine arms, and really no evidence of benefit, but it's not randomized. It only had men, a relatively older age group, so it's not a great study, but none of the studies are great. So we really have no significant data set that really shows us whether this drug is effective, and quite a bit of circumstantial data that points in the opposite direction.
Points in the opposite direction. And Brian Stelter, that's the point about the responsibility of our business and the president, but we can only speak, I guess I can only speak for our business, I don't speak for him, in that, as the doctor notes, we need more data, we need more evidence, but in anxious times, people sometimes do look to people they trust for guidance, and we know there was a run on this drug.
Yes, and the millions of Americans who use this drug for approved purposes, including my wife, people who have autoimmune issues and need this drug, became worried they wouldn't be able to get it because of the drug pushing that was happening on Fox News and from the White House podium. You know, the president yesterday was asked about this new study, and he said he hadn't seen the report. And that may be because Fox News is barely talking about it, because it doesn't fit the narrative that was being promoted in late March and early April. But recently, Fox has moved on. They've stopped talking about this drug and the hope that it could be beneficial. They've moved on to other quick fixes and other pro-Trump narratives. You know, this network, these stars, they think they're helping the president, but they're actually hurting him when they push these narratives. And ultimately, they're misleading their viewers, and that's why it is so troubling. Why would we ever think a Fox News star or any president should be promoting a drug? It's outlandish.
It is outlandish. To be fair, though, Dr. Reiner, the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, a Democrat, did say, let's give this a try. The federal government sent him an inventory of hydroxychloroquine, and New York did a limited study. And then they've sent the results now of some patients, like compassionate care, I think, is if a doctor's having trouble with a patient, you ask the patient, nothing else is working, do you want to try this? And it's up to the patient to do it. And they have sent data to the FDA now and the CDC. Because that was taxpayer funded, eventually we have to see that, right?
Yeah, and we will see it. There are several really good clinical trials that will answer the question, and probably pretty quickly. But there are all kinds of ways to use the drug. Do you use it early on in the disease? Do you wait till people get sick? Do you use it in young people or old people? Which patients can't you use it in? So these are answers that we have to have, and we'll have them eventually, but we need the data before we recommend the use of this drug widely.
We'll have them eventually, but stick with the medical opinion for a second. Doctor, so you're in a situation like this, a lot of things are being tested. How long? It takes months, correct? To know?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I have a colleague who spoke to me from New York last week, and he told me about a patient who was sick, actually another physician, who was treated with hydroxychloroquine, as well as remdesivir and convalescent plasma, and the patient pulled through, which is fabulous. But how do you know which of these agents or which agents in combination were responsible? The only way to know that is to trial them, and we have to do that. This virus is going to come back, and when it comes back, we want to be armed with weapons that we know work. Now is the time to get that data.
Right, now is the time to get that data. And to your point, did the patients just recover? Did these drugs help them? Was it one? Was it the other? But Brian, we know in the president's case, sometimes he says things and Fox picks up the ball, but often it's Fox that says things and then the president picks up the ball.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We've seen that several times during this coronavirus crisis. The idea about the cure being worse than the disease, we need to reopen right away. These are narratives that have mostly started in right-wing media and then made their way to the president. And he was certainly influenced by all the talk about this drug on Fox News as well. But like I said, they then move on to different narratives on different days, just trying to keep the audience's attention for one more day, I suppose. What would be more responsible is for Fox News stars and for the president's other media allies to emphasize what our doctor here is saying. This is going to take time. We all have to be patient, no matter how hard that is.
Well, I hope as quickly as they can they release the data that New York sent them. It's a bigger group. We'll see if we get that as well. Dr. Reiner, Brian Stelter, very much appreciate your insights.